to Enjoy Parenting. I'm Kyle Steele, the host of Enjoy Parenting, father of two, and my co-host, as always, is Lisa VanDamme, mother of four. And this is a bit of a sad episode for us. This is going to be our last episode that we're planning of Enjoy Parenting. Lisa has found that she has a lot of obligations, big surprise there, and she needs to prioritize how she's spending her time. I'm also not without a long list of priorities in my life, and so we're both going to step back from the podcast, but we've had a lot of fun with this. This has been taking us in places I wouldn't have expected, and I just want to express my gratitude to everyone that has participated and played along with us over the year. Lisa, do you have any remarks about our...
I think we ought to leave on the table that we may sometime come back.
Yeah.
Because we really do enjoy having these conversations. And no, that's it's been a lot of fun. It's been really valuable for me to just sort of explicitly conceptualize things that might be instinctual, and also to always hear your clever formulations and great insights into parenting too. So I know I'm coming away with a lot. So I hope other people did too.
Well, for our last episode, we have a guest, which is always a fun thing to have. We've got George with us today. George, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're coming from and what you're hoping to talk about today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 42 years old, and I'm a single dad of a 4.5-year-old boy. He's a lovely boy. His name is Leo Ragnar, actually. The middle name came out of the fact that he was born 60 years from the publication date of Atlas Shrugged.
Oh,
so for that coincidence, I decided to give him the name of my favorite character from Atlas Shrugged as a middle name. I, apart from being a single dad, recently full custody single dad, I also have a very busy professional career that I have aspirations for, and I try to have some hobbies as well. As you can see, I'm surrounded by some of them, and there's more, so I try to pursue all of that, and time, as you know, is a limited resource. So this, I believe that this show should focus more about the challenges of single parenting, and also how to not forget that apart from a parent, you also have other goals in life, which I think sometimes can be easily forgotten. And before a few years, I was also a stepdad. For many years, so I have experience of that, and we can discuss a bit about how that is as well.
Mm-hmm. And how old were the stepchildren?
There was a boy that I got into his life when he was about 5.5 years old, and I left that relationship with his mom when he was about 11.5 years old. So we spent quite a lot of time together, and we still have some relationship. It's not as close as it was, but we still maintain some contact and a relationship.
That's nice.
Okay.
So what, you have a lot going on.
Yeah.
What do you face as some of the most significant challenges trying to balance now single fatherhood with full custody and a demanding career and hobbies? What are the biggest struggles that you face?
Let's start with the positives, right? There's some positives to it as well. And I think when you share custody with someone, you always have the worry about whether they are going to do things the way you would like them to do. Yes. In terms of parenting your child, what are the priorities they're going to teach the child to have, how they're going to treat certain health scares or conditions or whatever, and to have a harmonious relationship with an ex-partner and co-parent, and to also maintain your mental health, is important to put a boundary and say, okay, I'm responsible for my parenting while I'm there, But when I'm not there, I don't live in the house anymore with my former partner. Therefore, I should learn to accept whatever happens, whether that is wouldn't meet my standards or whether it would. I should just accept it. Now, this is a general approach that can work, but there is always limits to it. And so having full custody, you don't have to worry about that anymore. So that's a positive thing. You can do things as you like. It's kind of as any project work that requires teamwork. You rely on your teammates. Sometimes your teammates let you down. So when you do a project on your own, you don't have to worry about your teammates anymore, but it's a lot more work for you. And parenting is no different. So the key challenge is the time limitations. And also, I believe that in the workplace, certainly in my banking sector where I work, sort of it's more expected of women to take time off or to maybe have a more flexible schedule in order to tend to their families. From men, it's kind of, it surprises people when I say, you know what, every day I have to stop at that specific time because I need to go and pick up my son from his nursery. That is, but now they're used to it. So I've worked around this.
Okay. Well, I just want to echo that I think one of the most, in my personal experience, one of the most extraordinarily painful challenges of life is trying to parent in an adversarial relationship with an ex, because one aspect of that is what you identified, that you have no control over anything about the other household, and much of what happens might be at odds with what you would do, whether that's discipline or nutrition or sleep habits, or, there's so many elements to a child's life that you've suddenly lost control of much of the time. But additionally, if you're not aligned in those things and it's adversarial at all, and also you don't want to put the kids in the position of having to argue for your parenting style. That's a really uncomfortable place to put the child too. Yes. So I guess, you have to just sort of have them accept that I have my reasons, your other parent has their reasons, and we're each just going to have to do things the way we see best in our own households. I guess that's how I would explain it to them. But that's inevitably confusing for them. But the other aspect that I think is even more painful and difficult is that if it's antagonistic, if you're at odds with each other and it's antagonistic, it takes a heroic character not to bring the kids into the antagonism. I think that's a very hard thing to do. And I think it's something I see a lot of people do very poorly. Interestingly, at our school, we have a very small number of divorced families. I think certainly not the statistical average at all, but we have seen several families where it's very antagonistic and the kids end up being pawns in the disputes. And that is so painful to see the kids suffer that. And I know for the parents that, those who are sincerely trying to provide the best environment possible for the kids are at the mercy of whether the other parent is going to use the child as a pawn in the antagonism between you. So, I can completely sympathize with a sense of relief at having full control over your child's upbringing.
Yeah. And joint custody is a classic prisoner's dilemma from game theory, where it would be best if both cooperated, but they both have strong incentives to not cooperate and no promise that they won't be taken advantage of if they're the more cooperative one. But it sounds like you've resolved that, and that you had a good attitude in the moment of trying to accept what you can and can't control and do the best with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was antagonistic, maybe for the first few months when it was still new. But after that, it was just difference in the mindset and standards and ideas, which drove us apart anyway. This was part of the reason why we broke up. And
Sure.
I think one of the things to bring up here is there's a lot of people that stay together for the children, and I was victim of that for a very long time. I was saying, and I found myself thinking at some point, is it a good idea to break up now, or should I wait until my son goes into college and then I break up with her? But my son was like 2.5 years old, so that would mean a long time. So then I thought, no, this is a terrible way to think about it. If I have to think about it, then I probably should do it now.
Can I interject something? So there was a time when I would have thought that was almost an absurd question, that should you stay together for the sake of the children? That just seems so, on the face of it, self-sacrificial and detrimental. There was always the conventional argument that if you are unhappy or you're not setting a good example of the way to live a happy life for your children, then you're just going to be failing them anyway. I don't feel the same way about that anymore. I won't say I've come to the idea that you ought to stay together for the children, but it's a much more compelling argument to me now, having gone through an antagonistic and adversarial divorce. I can conceive of a situation where it would not be devastating and damaging to the children if you're able to maintain a certain civility in relationship. But I guess I've now just been witness to so many examples where the children suffered so much pain. Now, this is related to what you said before. If that is what is going to happen should you separate, then probably the problems within the relationship are going to be significant enough that that's also going to be problematic and damaging. But anyway, the only point is that I guess I have seen much more clearly, apart from anything about antagonism or struggles in divorce, how hard it is for children to lose a parent as part of their, that kind of stable home with two parents. And it's certainly something that I know for a fact can be overcome. But I also just, the pain of it for children is a little more tangible to me at this point.
And how about the ideal age to, like, if you could choose an age for parental breakup to happen that would have the least impact on the child, would that be when they're young and haven't formed the concepts of relationships yet, or would it be better when they're teenagers where they kind of don't get hurt so much, they're a bit hardened?
I don't really know, and I guess my reaction, maybe this somewhat contradicts what I said before. I guess the question isn't easy and obvious to me in the way that it used to be, but I might still come around to the same answer. And I guess when you ask that question, what I think is what matters most is what's in your control, and that you do the best with what's within your control. So it's under the most extraordinary of circumstances, if you have good, sound parenting principles and you have a good relationship with your child and you're providing well for them, you can provide them a good, happy, satisfying, psychologically healthy upbringing. I do think that's within a person's power. I just think some traumas are harder to overcome than others.
I know little and less about divorce. I am the child of divorce, but I was 30 when the divorce happened, so it didn't have too much of an impact on my childhood.
So there's your age, 30.
I'm an adult.
Do you think they were happy, or they stayed together for you until you turned 30 and then they said, okay, now Kyle is ready? He's ready for it.
I don't think that they conceived of it that way.
Okay.
But I'm still gonna take a risk here and put forward a point or a metaphor. It's that I think that in particular circumstances, one could ask the question, is now or later a better time for the divorce? But I don't think that there's a hard and fast rule. And the big thing that I think about it, this is where the weird analogy comes in. If you know that a child is going to have an amputation, like, do you want it early in life or later in life? Well, there's no good answer to that question. Mm-hmm. What the energy should be put on is, what are we going to do after the amputation? That's where most of the good you can do for the child is going to happen. So timing the divorce, I don't think is as important as making sure that there's love and stability and support after the divorce, if that makes. Yeah. Lisa, does that sound like, am I way off base here?
Oh, no, I think that's true. And there's something I'm groping at that I'm feeling the need for an answer to, and I don't have one. And I'll just start with an example. There was a podcast a while back where somebody asked the question about how to deal with strife with his ex-wife. And my answer, which may not have been helpful, was make a priority of having it not involve strife. And it's not what he was looking for. He was looking for advice about how to resolve the differences between them. But for me, the whole focus was try to have there not be antagonism between you. So elevate that above the particulars of so the thing that I'm struggling with is, I don't know if it's just something that needs to change about the culture in general, something that needs to be changed about how we talk to people about relationships. But I want people to go into marriage thinking it's going to last forever. Yeah. And if it's not going to last forever, having as the second commitment be, we are going to be as committed, as honestly, as amicably, as respectfully and gracefully as we can to working together positively for the sake of the children. And I just don't see that as a cultural commitment on the par with the commitment to marriage or anything that we regard as a sacred commitment. I wish people also regarded it as a sacred personal commitment to doing the best they can in that regard.
Yeah.
Well, what I would add is, I mean, yes, your idea, Lisa, is great, but it takes two to tango, and sometimes it doesn't happen. But to the person that asked that question, I would say, well, still, imagine being in that relationship and having that strife happening on a daily basis, multiple times a day when you're together. At least when you're co-parenting, you have it on the occasion that you have to cooperate, like, I don't know, a handover of the child, or I don't know, some discussion involving all the other time. You don't have to deal with this person that gives you that trouble. So then, you are better off. You're much better off than your previous life.
Just to clarify the thing I'm after, though, the sacred commitment I want is to not involving the children in the descent. Yeah. That's what I would like people to have as a more explicit commitment. And that seems, you can never, I mean, obviously you need somebody's buy-in, and they have to have the strength of character and the soundness of judgment even to agree to that. But I don't feel like that's talked about enough, that ought to be an absolutely sacred commitment to not involve your children in any strife between you within the context of a relationship. And then especially, I think, after a relationship is dissolved, because they're already struggling with the dissolution.
Yeah. This ties into other themes that we've talked about in other episodes, Lisa, that parenting is in an enormous state of cultural flux, because the ubiquity of divorce, or the ease of divorce, is not something that we have the cultural institutions to really know how to handle. Like, we haven't really worked out the practices for that. And the idea of staying together for the kids is way too broad of a rule, but it's at least one form of that commitment to putting the well-being of the kids above the conflict that you have with your partner. But I feel like we're getting a bit further away from where George started. I was hoping to hear a bit more about, it sounded like you were wanting to bring up challenges of balancing things as a single parent? Is that where the bulk of the issue?
That's a challenge. Yeah, that's a fair description of my current situation. And then even when balancing, so the thing is, say for example, you find ways to delegate parenting responsibility to a babysitter or a grandparent or whatever, right? When you do that and you pursue your other interests, then it's always in the back of your mind, you know what, I should be spending time with my child. Then you miss them. Then when you're with them, you're like, oh my God, I cannot, like, another round of trying to write numbers or whatever, or reading this story that he's read a million times. You're going to degenerate, and you're like, oh, I wish I was playing my guitar or lifting my weights or, I don't know, doing some work to make more money. So it's a it's difficult to focus.
Yeah. I'm not a single father, and I can relate to that feeling enormously. I work full time, and we have my wife does as well. We have a nanny, so we're both away, and we miss him. We miss both of them enormously throughout the day. And then when I get home, it's hard for me to let go of work. I see all kinds of chores I want to do around the house. I feel that addictive tug of my cell phone to check email or whatever it is. So I feel like it's probably quite acute for you as a single parent because you can't swap back and forth and have a division of labor. But I think this is a theme that anyone can relate to.
I mean, when there's a toddler, right, you can't even leave them alone to go to the bathroom, to take a shower. Taking a shower, taking the rubbish out is like, oh, can I leave them alone? Because up to a certain age, you don't know what they're going to do left alone. Like they may harm themselves pretty seriously if you don't look at them, watch them 24/7.
Yeah.
One comment on that is, now I recognize that I'm in an extremely fortunate position in this regard, but to the extent that you can delegate in a way that you think actually is a net improvement, I mean, that is the I think it's a doable goal. So just for example, this summer, I have a lot of work projects that I want to do. My kids are out of school. They've got the whole summer in front of them. So I've hired my eldest daughter, who's 22, to watch them during the day while I'm getting work done. Now, because it's her full-time commitment, it's her focus. She's being paid and paying her to do this. They have a schedule. They just baked cupcakes. They read Harry Potter this morning. They have craft time. They have game time, and they have this whole structured day, which frankly, if I were watching them myself, it would not be this structured. It would not be, nice. I wouldn't be this involved in the whole thing. It's definitely a net gain for them. Mm-hmm. So finding ways, sometimes getting a babysitter, obviously you don't want to farm out everything to a babysitter, but sometimes getting a babysitter means they're in a sense better taken care of in that moment because it's the babysitter's whole focus. So that's one thing to strive for in delegation. Do you have a good network of people too? This is another thing that Kyle and I talk about all the time as being lost to culture, is like the broad network of family members or community.
Yeah, I have my parents, but they're a bit old, so they're not really capable to look after him much. He runs around and they cannot run after him. Yeah. And I don't know, like in general, I don't know where you guys live, but London, people that live next door are strangers. You don't have the sense of community that you may have in smaller towns. So, I mean, would I tell Razik to come over to look after Leo, who lives like, I don't know. First of all, I don't know if he would be good at it. But even if he was,
I want you to do that, and then I want to have an episode about that. After.
Okay, yeah, we can have an extra bonus episode for this season. Okay.
He can call in live while he's babysitting.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Let's do
that. Yeah. So I don't know if I completely understand that problem. I don't know any of I'm in sort of a small town in a sense, because it's very suburban, but it's not a small town in the sense that people have lived here a long time and they all know each other. It's, California is all transplants. So, so it's not something that I feel I've been very successful at, but it's something that I think is a good goal to have, especially as a single parent, to figure out how you can
have to be very careful. That's the thing, Lisa. You have to be very careful, because you don't know who's going to volunteer to look after your child. They may have other motives that you want to be worried about.
But I'm more talking about building a network of people where you know them well, or within a context where you can get to know them well. There's all sorts of kind of meetup organizations, and so it may not be doable, but it's something that I wish were easier to create than it is presently.
I'll put out a couple of ideas. These may be things that have already occurred to you, but I've had a lot of success with trying to shifting my focus from paying attention to what Isaac wants to do, my 3-year-old, to incorporating him in what I want to do. And usually it's made up. It's like, we're going to cook. Why don't you cut these leaves for no reason? And he's on the cutting board for that. Or I was putting together a sofa yesterday, and I gave him one of those extra IKEA wrenches. I'm like, you go tighten up those bolts, buddy.
Nice.
And he wasn't doing anything. He might have actually slowed me down, but it was still, I was able to, one, he loved it. He loves participating in that way. 2, he might actually learn something useful to do. Like he might actually be valuable. Like, go throw this in the trash. He can manage that. And 3, I get to feel like I'm pursuing more than one value at the same time, which has been really good for me. You do have to, another phrase that we say a lot on the show, make space for your kids to be kids. I have to accept that making that sofa took, an hour and a half instead of an hour, because Isaac was underfoot. But it was still better than like getting a babysitter so that I could assemble a sofa. That would not be a good outcome for me.
And it gave you an opportunity to be involved while accepting your own limitations on what you want to do with your time. We've talked about this before, but I'm not playing dolls with my child. It's just, it's for me, for whatever reason, that activity is such a strain and so unnatural. It's not how we're going to engage with each other. I'll take her to the library and we'll pick up books. I'll read them to her. But so trying to keep them involved with you, but a little bit on your terms too.
Well, we're lucky because my son likes video games and I like video games, so we play a lot of video games together. And he's into all these old school like Pac-Man and Super Mario, the old ones, the original ones. He loves it. I don't know why, because he has all the new ones. But
well, it's easy to understand. I also wanted to just pick on something that you said earlier that I think is praiseworthy, that, you mentioned that the people at work have accepted that you're going to be leaving at this certain time to go to a nursery. One thing that I was imagining saying that I don't have to is you just have to set boundaries between the different realms of your life and make sure that you can stick to them. So I'm sure that habit will help you out a lot.
The way I did it is I blocked my calendar.
Yeah.
So the time that I had to go, because people would call me or people would put a meeting for me on my calendar, and then like, okay, I have to reschedule and all. But now I've put it's there every day. It's a recurring daily one. And suddenly, after a couple of weeks of people not being able to book me at the time, they realized that if we want George in a meeting, we cannot put it at 5 o'clock.
It's amazing how little the world falls apart when you do things like that. Good. I think we're getting to the end of our time, George, but I've really enjoyed this talk. Are there any last thoughts or questions that you want to bring up before we move over to Clubhouse?
No, it's all good. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Once again, thanks everyone. This has been a fun ride for us. You can join us on Clubhouse and we'll be there in just a minute or two. Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.